course, my friend Misha Saakashvili, who I first met when he was a young man attending George Washington University, and told me that he wanted to go back to his country and make it free. And he obviously turned a country that I remember when I was there under Shevardnadze, that you couldn't walk down the street in Tbilisi without a security guard. And now, of course, if you happen to go downtown Tbilisi, you'll see a restored and beautiful city. And the themes here obviously are P3, the public-private partnership, hereafter known as P3. But we're also talking about three different categories: the political environment, the investment climate, and infrastructure gaps. But I think it's very difficult to talk as much about parts of this without understanding the challenges that these countries are facing today, as opposed to, say, 10, 15 years ago when they were emerging democracies and throwing off the stifling mantle of communism to develop free and open societies. And on the one hand, I think you can look at, and many in this room have visited all three countries, at the remarkable progress, double-digit and high single-digit GDP, assumption of leadership roles in many respects, whether it be culturally, socially, economically, and of course, countries where we now have opportunities for this new generation that some of us in earlier days never thought possible. And as I said, it requires leadership and people to step forward who are genuine patriots to bringing these countries, once the Iron Curtain fell, to where they are today. And it's all not perfect, obviously. In Georgia, we have situations that I'm sure that Misha, in his own inimitable way, will describe dramatically for you. But also, we look at this whole situation with Ukraine, and maybe we could start out, if we could, beginning with you, President Kwasniewski, maybe we ought to ask all three of our panelists, how did you do it? So, Misha, I'd like you to mention the issue of media. We won the Cold War, in the words of Margaret Thatcher. She said Ronald Reagan won the Cold War without firing a shot. And one of the major instruments of that was Radio Free Europe, the Voice of America. I'll never forget the first time I ever met Nathan Sharansky, who told a story that many of you have heard, that when Ronald Reagan mentioned his name, and it spread through the Gulag like wildfire, and it inspired these people who were in the Gulag. We don't seem to have that now. It seems that Voice of America or Radio Free Europe or whatever it is has not really been brought into the 21st century, especially in the area of social networking. And the other thing I'd like you to mention, Misha, is that how you were able to get so much investment into your little country. One of the themes of this Concordia is how the public-private partnership works, and yet on my visits to your country, I saw enormous investment, whether it be Hyatt hotels or whether it be a Sheraton, whether it be other industries. And that, I think, was really one of the major accomplishments of your early years, going from a state-controlled economy to one that I recommend to many of you, when you consider another summer vacation going to Batumi, you'll see literally every major American hotel and tourist industry business there as well. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit, and then we'll move on to other subjects.
Yes, Senator, thank you, first of all, and I have to say that you can really see it. I mean, it's a huge risk have Concordia at this time, at this place in New York, in this place in New York, because there's hundreds of other events going on. And it really makes it very special that Nick and his team have specially worked whole year to bring this incredible crowd in one place. I mean, it never happens from my long experience. I want to thank you and compliment you on that. And the other thing is, I have to say that Senator McCain was certainly somebody with long and I'm sure productive future, but he's somebody also with big background, and actually exactly the same way as Winston Churchill predicted what would happen with the rise of Hitler, and everybody ridiculized him and mocked him and said that he was a dangerous warmonger. I heard the same things said over and over again, and I know it because I was also dubbed as his agent and co-conspirator, a number of accounts, but many others of like out there, like many of us, saying that he's terribly wrong on ISIS, he's terribly wrong on ISIS was not there yet, but on Syria, he's terribly wrong on Putin. While Cold War is over, this guy wants us to bring back to old times. But in fact, he turned out to be totally right, except that I don't think that vindication is the right word to be happy about when you see what's happening. Now, Georgia, going back to your question, Georgia, first of all, in propaganda, you just gave $10 million to counter Russian propaganda in the world. That's 1 week's budget of Russia Today television. With all due respect, this is U.S. Congress allocated $10 million. It just makes Putin laugh, frankly. And that's not going to change anything. The other thing is that when we talk about how Georgia succeeded, and it relates to this topic, because it was indeed public-private partnership, mostly private and public facilitating, at least getting out of the way of private sector. We were 127th country in the world in terms of doing business environment on World Bank list. We brought it all the way to a number 8 in 5-6 years' time. For all 9 years of my presidency on World Bank rankings, Georgia was the world's #1 reformer. For small countries, benchmarks matter, and for Great Poland, it's maybe which did extremely well under this great gentleman. Everybody knows Poland, but if you are small Latvia, Georgia, you need to have benchmarks. So we were one of the most corrupt countries in the world. We moved 72 positions up on Transparency International list, and we became one of 3 least corrupt countries in the world. We were one of the most criminalized countries. We were basically the same thing that what Sicily was exporting to America, we were exporting to the rest of Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, organized crime. We became the safest country in Europe in 5 years in a row of last years of my administration. Etc., etc. So we really did this long way. But then what happened that with all the successes, we never made it to NATO, as President Freiberger rightly said, and so Russia decided that this needed to be killed. And they, well, achieved a certain degree of success by sending in Russian billionaire, giving $2 billion for election campaign in Georgia of entirely black money. I'm sorry, but we are a country of GDP of less than 20 billions. 2 billions coming in one election campaign. You can imagine what would be the disastrous effects. And that's something that is awaiting now Ukraine, by the way. So that's what had happened. And then that's where Putin doctrine comes in. That if all these countries want to be successful, they don't really have right to do so. Because success is achieved through democracy and through free enterprise, through non-corrupt practices, free, most dangerous things for Putin. Because if there is democracy, it's a dangerous precedent for Russia. If it's a dangerous democracy, it's double dangerous, that's precedent. If people are not corrupt, how can he bribe and play around, right? So it's not such a fertile ground. So what really, and then there is this new Putin doctrine that came in force after Ukraine, saying if you raise against your corrupt anti-democratic governments, and if you want to live a normal life, not only your new government will be delegitimized, the country gets delegitimized. So Ukraine threw out Yanukovych, and Putin basically said, Ukraine doesn't exist anymore. Borders are no longer intact. I can go and grab it and forget about everything. They don't have right to ask for decent life. So that's one thing. But then Jan Brammer here was saying, well, the US withdrew from the world. But the problem is that the US cannot withdraw from the world. US, by saying things that we withdraw, it is also a policy. So when the US says Cold War is over, then it sends message for Putin, fight your Cold War, the US is not going to fight it, to fight back. When the US says we will not arm Ukraine, It's a sense message to Putin, prop in more weapons, because Russia doesn't have technology superior advantage over Ukraine. So, you know, if U.S. had poured in at least some weapons, that would have made huge difference. But, you know, there are Charlie Wilsons of the world to organize those things, right? So, and then if you say, we will protect NATO at the moment when fighting is going in eastern Ukraine, when you say we will draw a line, we'll protect our allies in NATO under Article 5. That basically says that's the line. Polish border is the line. And the rest is up for grab. So there are words that basically communicate certain things to Vladimir Putin. And those things have been communicated for all the internal or external or whatever. And I know that that's U.S. public mood. I'm not talking about just politicians. U.S. public mood had been like that, but then there are consequences, that there are costs to be incurred when you say or you articulate also things like that. And then the other thing is very important. I remember talking to one CIS leader to whom the U.S. government has asked me at a certain moment to communicate certain wish lists on some issues related to security and foreign policy. And the man, who is not exactly known for his democratic practice, told me, you know, I will do it for the U.S. even if it angers Russia, for a simple reason. U.S. never abandons its allies, and Russia, you cannot really trust them. Well, but the now perception might be shifting. Perception might be shifting that, yeah, it's no, being ally of the U.S. may be not always as reliable as being ally of Russia. In the case of Assad, that proved to be true. So Assad is still around and keeps, I think, very much stronger than ever before. So but having said all that, I still believe that there were the number of very strategic blunders committed with Putin, and it's not as bad as we might think. First of all, he really alienated everybody in post-Soviet space. You know, anything that Russia could have had as a soft power is gone. Putin does really believe in soft power. He does believe that there is a long-term love in politics, which he might be right about. So he believes that he should scare and deter, and he should frighten. And he's very good at that, but that also leaves no space for love for him or for Russia, indeed, no love lost. Second, he just created in the center of Europe, nation of more than 40 million people, by the way, Russian speakers, that absolutely hate Russia in this policy. That's a huge long-term disaster for Russia. And he just created a precedent, and Strobe Talbot is right on that one, that when you change your borders by force, it's a precedent primarily for the Russian Federation. So no borders are sacred anymore, and Putin believes that if he's not on attack, he will go back, and it's right, because now once he's attacked, he will eventually have to go back, and Russia will no longer be able to keep its territorial integrity because it's up for grab, and the Cold War, post-Cold War order was just slaughtered by him. So actually, in long run, there are lots of weaknesses that they show, and in the long run, because precisely they didn't go for the same model as we went for, they don't want to change economy, they don't want to open up, they don't want to have real investment, they don't want to have democracy and freedom. In the end, they are going to fail. But meanwhile, what will be the price? What will be the toll upon country of Ukraine? Will Ukraine end up like Bosnia, because that's what Milosevic is gone, Serbia is decently, doing more or less well, but Bosnia has still lots of problems. And because of the issues that were left behind from Dayton and all the others and the whole situation, will Ukraine end up like Bosnia? But that would be a disaster for Europe. And then or all the other countries around us, what will happen to all of us? Even if Russia, once Putin is gone and whatever happens to Russia. So the issue here is, what will be the cost? And again, we come back to core issue. Is the West, the United States, willing to stand up for freedom and for its values? Because when we are talking about ISIS, which is an extremely grave danger for all of us, but the issue here is, if the US could not stand up and defend, and if it doesn't decide to stand up and defend its own civilization, and what's happening in Europe, it's Euro-Atlantic civilization. It's a free world. It is exactly, I mean, Poroshenko was right when he was speaking in Congress. It's not about Ukraine, because lots of politicians were saying, oh, we don't really care about Ukraine, or it just happens to US democratic values. If this is not to be defended, then what is there to be defended? And who will respect? With all the things, Putin is you are right, he is defending his ideology. He has ideology and he is going for it. And what's the ideology on the other side? Because no matter where we want it or not, Cold War is back, or some kind of semi-Cold War, and we have actually, people, we need new George Kennans to talk at least about containment, if not about hitting back. So I'll finish on that one, and I just want to say that, there are many big dangers ahead of us, because meanwhile, he will continue to be a spoiler in Ukraine. He is now seriously considering a new military adventures in Moldova, maybe, in the Caucasus. They just announced that they are building military road, something that Putin announced as a road for military invasion into Georgia from Dagestan. That would be a direct link to invade Georgia militarily in the center, but also Azerbaijan through Georgia, because there's a narrow stripe. So he's building up forces to invade Azerbaijan. And by the way, they really invested heavily to destabilize also that country. And the problem with that is that, if you are somebody like Ilham Aliyev and say, okay, but what happened in Georgia? And then there are Azeri billionaires in Moscow saying we should go after him, precisely for some simple reason. Not because of political difference, but because this place is Moscow, because he can be supplier of Europe. So he goes after them. So with all this, we are really seeing going through a very dangerous curve, and we should all be very careful. But in the long run, as I said, this policy might have no future, but at least we should bring this long run to be closer to us so that we can all survive and be still around. Thank you.
President.